Welcome to today's episode of the Australian Lawn and Garden Podcast. This is my favorite episode to do. It's the most popular episode we've ever done. And what is the story? Every year, for the last 3 years, I have asked hundreds of Australian lawn and garden businesses exactly what they charge. And this year, we had 811 responses. And even though we've done it every year, and even though I had some ideas on what I thought was going to happen, the results are really shocking, especially when you compare it to the last 2 years. So 2022, 2023, and then 2024. Now, I asked this at the start of every year. So obviously we're still in January of 2024, but the results from each question, anyway, it's super fascinating. Let me tell you, we did this podcast a year ago. Oh, well, not quite a year ago, but it's one of the most popular podcasts I've ever done. And the thing about it is there's this common pain point, and this is why it's such a popular podcast. There's probably on all platforms close to 10,000, maybe over 10,000 people who have listened to this podcast for this industry, for an Australian lawn and garden business, like businesses. I believe there's only 18,000, from what I understand, based on what I've been told on APN registrations, 18,000 businesses in the country. So to have 10,000 listens, or at least people clicking on, because that's how YouTube and these places measure them, is huge numbers. And I'm sure lots of people have clicked on it twice, and there's a bunch of people who clicked on, listened to 3 seconds and clicked off, But there's a massive pain point in the industry. And the pain point is, before we get to this data, which I will do in just a minute, but when you go on Google, the results you get on Google for how much Australian lawn and garden businesses charge, it is so low. And when I first started my business 10 years ago, I'm going to chat this on the screen, the Google results. We had results like this. Number one, if you type in how much do Australian lawn mowing businesses charge, right, that's exactly what I put in. Number one results. On average, you can expect to pay, this is a quote, between $35 and $85 per hour for professional lawn mowing services, up to $120 for sit on lawn mowing services. The average hourly rate across Australia is approximately $55. That is rubbish, people. We say it all the time, but I'm going to show you the data from this year in a minute. But if you scroll down, labor rates run from $35 to $55 per hour. Next one, lawn mowing in Australia costs $40 an hour. Now, the next one is my article. Praise the Lord, something is happening. And this is from last year's survey. And I said the results of the survey from last year show that most lawn mowing contractors charge between $70 and $90 per hour. This year's stuff is way different. Well, some the same, a lot of it. Yeah, I'll show you. You keep going down, $60 an hour, $40 to $60 an hour, $35 to $150 an hour. I mean, you may, why even give a number if it's going to be lawn mowing businesses charge $35? You may as well just say they charge money. $35 to $150 an hour is just as, anyways. And then at the bottom, literally, I don't know, the 10th result is that podcast that we did from a year ago. Now, people, that is more on how much, how to actually work out your pricing as well. I'm not going to go into that on this. I'm just going to review the data on these. And so anyways, what happens is, and the pain point, I'll get to these data in a minute, but the pain point is a lot of businesses start out believing that Google is not misleading them. Google's pointing them in the right direction. And so they go, well, I've just started a business. What do I know? And so they go, well, $35 to $85 per hour sounds okay. It sounds like it makes sense. 85 sounds great. Let's start at 60. That's somewhere in the middle, right? That seems fair. I'm just beginner. 35 doesn't seem much. Or maybe I haven't started at 50. And then very quickly, maybe this is your story. Very quickly, they find out that it does not work at that rate. That is not a sustainable business model. And so they start raising their prices, but they feel guilty because they feel like, how am I getting this wrong? If the entire country is charging between this rate and I'm brand new, how am I getting this wrong? And I don't know how many people have gone out of business because of the advice that's on the internet saying this kind of stuff. So let's go in and put this right, and let's change, hopefully, the results. You see these results that I've been writing. Honestly, my goal for this Like, if I can be of service to the industry after I've made almost every mistake under the sun, I tell you what, and one of them is this. And if I could be of service, I'd be so proud of these results starting to change to reflect what people are actually charging, because I know I love small businesses. I want people to succeed, even though technically some of you listening to this are my direct competitors. I want small businesses to succeed because I see the value in you spending time with your kids. Going from firefighter to gardening is such an underrated industry. It's such a valuable industry for health and mental health and well-being, getting out in the sun and being proud of yourself because you're running a small little business, and maybe it's just you and you're never going to grow into a massive organization. But I would love for you to succeed. I'd love for you to be able to go home, be proud of yourself at night for the work that you've done, making the world a more beautiful place, literally, and then make some good money so that you can bless your family. Like, take your kids out to some nice place and, I don't know, go to a water park. And what do people do for fun these days? I'm boring. I don't know. I just watch cricket. But anyways, do something fun. Like, that's my passion. Anyways, let's get into this actual data. All right, so on the screen, I've put up the 2022 data for the surveys because I'm going to give some context to this. And very quickly, I'm going to go across. Here's 2023 for those who are watching on YouTube, and there's 2024. I'm going to explain this all out for you. For those who are listening, which is probably the majority of you, I'm going to do my best to explain it. 2022, what do we see? Now, I've got some other numbers in a spreadsheet in the background here so I can give you some percentages and things like that. We had 346 responses in 2022. Right, so this is the start of 2022. It's probably more reflective to say in all these years that this is what people charged from the year previous. 2022. Now, what's fascinating is this is still the height of COVID, and there's a lot of things like that. So, well, not the height of COVID, 2021. Remember, there's still a lot of COVID lockdowns, things like that happening. If you look at the data, it's very interesting. We had 2 people from 2022 out of the 346 say they charge less than $50 an hour. Right. Okay, some of you've been charging around $50 an hour and you thought that was the average. It's 2, right? 50 to 60 or 50 to 59 was 15. So out of 346, do you want to know how many people were actually it was like less than 20 people out of 346 were actually charging $60 or less per hour. That's nuts, right? I'll keep flying through because you're here for 2024's data. I just need to set the context for those who haven't listened to previous episodes. The bulk, the majority of the charges were between $60 and $69 an hour and $70 and $79 an hour. In fact, there was 109 and 98 respectively for those categories. So if you put them together, basically 200, 210, a huge chunk, I would say 60% of the market was between, in 2021-22, was between $60 and $80 an hour. And I remember back then that felt about right, but a lot of the industry was struggling. Not many people were in the 80 to 89, although still, more than were charging less than $50 an hour. You had about 10 between 80 and 90. And then you had another big clump of 75 people that were $90 to $100 an hour. Now, what this means is, and then your scatterings of people above. Back in 2022, long story short, we had a huge number of people between $60 and $80 an hour, and a bigger chunk around the 90 to 100, and everybody else was splattered across the market. And that's what the story was. 2023, fascinating. We got, if you just look at the different pictures between the two, halved. The 60 to 69 range, which was massive, was halved, and the 80 to 89 range was doubled. So people moving up in big time. Still a lot of people between that $70 and $80 an hour range, but people started moving up. Way more people charging 90 to 100. Way more people charging 100 to 110. Basically, no one was charging 100 to 110 in 2022. You go 2023, it's the second most popular category. I think people were starting to wake up in 2023 that some of this information that was out online wasn't actually helpful. I put that almost entirely down to Facebook groups like Lawn Mowing Contractors Australia, which is actually where I run these surveys. Jump on there if you haven't already. There's now close to 7,000 people on that page. Very helpful. There's a great community of supportive people on that page. And so you see this general shift going up. But here's the 2024 data, the stuff you came for. If you can see on the screen, I'm going to, excuse me for my coughs, I'm very unprofessional. 2022 is low, 2023 is bulging in the middle, and 2024, my goodness, the number of businesses charging $140 an hour and up is huge. The number of businesses charging 120 or 130 is huge. You look, I'm alternating between the two photos. Between 2023, almost no one is charging that. 2024, bam, it's huge. Now, I've got way more responses. So I did say 2022, we had 346. The next year, we had 624. And this year, we had 811. So it's actually getting more and more, I guess you would say, accurate. The more people you have answering these questions, I guess the better representation it does of the country. Now, I should specify that this is from a lawn mowing contractors page, and a lot of people, you do have a diversity of services in there, but I think it's very rare, just to be clear, that it's very rare that you're going to have too many niche services in that. So I'm sure in the 140 plus range, there are a lot of niche services, but I'm also sure that there's just normal lawn mowing contractors who've got their route efficiency down, who I was chatting to someone today who was talking about charging $180 an hour, and that was their goal to get their clients up to that rate. Some of you are listening to this going, that is nuts. How the hell do you do that? Well, it's not out yet, but we've got a course that we're working on. I wasn't even planning on saying this. I've been working on doing an online course for ages. I don't know when it's going to be out. Maybe in a month. I'll put a comment when it's out and it's ready. We charge at my business, if we're going to do an hour, we're doing 157. Back in 2020, we were charging 127. We've always been, well, maybe not always, because I made a hell of a lot of mistakes early on. But if you want to learn about how to do that, then sure. We've also done a podcast with business coach Darren Gallagher on how to find $100 an hour clients. I'll put a link in the description. But people think, oh, that's crazy. It's not crazy. It's possible, and it's happening, right? Unless every single one of these people is lying, there's a huge change. If you look at 2022, I didn't even give $140 an hour option. I gave 130 as minimum. 90 to 99, big chunk, and a smattering of people above. Kind of the same in terms of 100, 110, a lot of people, smattering of people above. 2024, my goodness, look at the people above. But also, there's a huge chunk in the 80 to 89 range, and just on the scheme of things, there's very, very few people charging 60 to 69, 50 to 59, or even $50 or less. Other than, for whatever reason, 130 to 139 is the second least popular. But if you take that out, 60 to 70, well, charging in the 60s, the 50s, and below 50 are the least popular categories. I know it's hard to, if you're listening to this, it's hard to describe a spreadsheet. I'm sorry. If you're watching this, you can see exactly. I can just scroll through and just alternate between the two things. It's basically like everybody just got shoved up, right? Like that's 2023, everything just got shoved right up. That sounds real rude. I'm sorry. I realized that as I was saying it. All the categories got elevated each year. 2022, things were, I guess the data was, we're almost at, 40% of the answers we got in the last few weeks. But, 2023 to 2024, just everything moves up. And now I expected that to a degree, but the amount is crazy. Now you can have average hourly rates. I've written some stuff in the background. 2022, the average hourly rate was, now, okay, hold on a second. Before I say anything else, because I put in $140 plus, right? And actually, my data's wrong. It says, see how it says 140 to 149 there on my thing? That should say 140 plus. Is that what I've done? No, okay. Well, anyways, but because it's got 140 plus, people could be charging $200, $300 an hour for certain services. I do know of people who do ride-on work, and that's exactly what they're charging. Specialized machines, things like that. So you got to take these averages. The averages are actually a little bit lower than the market would be because I've capped the numbers at 140 to 150. I hope that makes sense. But if you look at the averages, these aren't on the screen, so I'm just going to tell you to them on camera. But 2022 average is $85 an hour. 2023 is $88. 2024, interestingly, is 89, close to 90. So it's only gone up $1 or so from 2023. Now, this is averages, but averages are not the most accurate way to do a comparison like this. The best comparison is actually to compare like a median. Median values provide a central point that represents the middle ground, and that's really what we're trying to get at. Averages kind of, you have the fringes affect things. So the median, I get that wrong, median hourly rates, 2022, we've got a range, was $80 to $90 an hour. 2023 was also $80 to $90 an hour. 2024, the median hourly rate is somewhere around $95 to $104 an hour. I'm so excited by that. I have been saying since like 2020, 2021 that lawn mowing businesses should be charging about $100 an hour for time on site. And I remember when I first posted, and I wasn't the only one who was posting that kind of stuff back then. I want to pretend like I was some amazing prophet, but I struggled for so many years, and I kept doing this maths, and it kept coming back as I need to charge this, and I didn't believe it. And I didn't believe it partly because of all the stuff that was online. And that's probably a big chunk of it. Like, I was like, how can I be the only one needing to charge that, 90, 95, 100 back, we're talking 2018, 2019, 2017 even. How come I'm the only one that needs to be charging $90+ an hour when everybody else apparently is around 60? But I kept doing the maths, and one day I was like, stuff it, I'm just going to charge that. Because I was losing money whenever I hired anybody. I would be fine on my own, and then I'd hire someone, I'd lose money. And what that means is you're actually paying yourself. Here's a little tangent. If you hire somebody and you lose money off them, say you're paying them $30 an hour, and then you go back out in the field, you replace them with yourself back again. If you don't change your prices, you're probably earning about $30 an hour if you're losing money off it. Now, you might be a little bit more efficient, or maybe a lot more efficient. But, if you've got a fairly good employee, you might be 10, 20% more efficient. And so maybe it is a little bit better than $30 an hour. But ultimately, if you can't put somebody on because you can't make money off them, every time you do, you're undercharging. And it might feel like you're charging a lot, but you're not. By definition, if you can't afford an employee, you're not paying yourself enough. Or you're not charging enough. So the median hourly rates are just way up. Like, to go from 80 to 90 to 80 to 90 is the range 2023 to 95 to 104. That's just nuts. So looking at this data, there's 5 major points that I'm getting from this, which I think are really fascinating. The first one is this, that every year the prices are rising. What I think is really interesting here is obviously the massive jump in 2023. What I feel, here's my gut feel. There's a few things that could be happening. Now, with any survey like this, you've got to take everything with a grain of salt and not look too closely. That's why we look at like the median and the averages and things like that. So you don't want to like overanalyze everything. But what's really interesting is like just the lack of low hourly rate. right? That's obviously the higher end stuff is really cool as well, but the middle of the range kind of stayed the same. So what I feel is the low hourly rates sort of kicked into the middle, and some of those middles kicked it up to the top. And what I think is happening from that is all those low ones, I think cost of living just made everybody go, screw it. Like, I have been struggling too long. All the prices are going up. I can't be stuffed trying to negotiate my way for dollars and cents. Here's what I want to charge. Bam. Probably a lot of people getting educated on online platforms, people being helpful, maybe listening to podcasts like ours, Aussie Lawn Stars, Skull Sessions with Ben and BJ, the landscaping podcast with Joel Barnett, even though that's landscaping, still lots of great business info in there. Like, people listening to those podcasts, all that sort of stuff, getting smarter. So the data shows a consistent upward trend in hourly rates over the 3 years, reflecting potential factors such as increased demand, which is another thing I think is fascinating. Like, you would think the inflation might reduce demand, but maybe there's a supply and demand issue there where, and I know this from conversations, people are just getting inundated with work and they can't handle it. Chatted with a marketing guy at Jim's, the biggest franchise group in the country, and he said they had 200,000 unserviced leads, right? Or businesses recognizing the value of the services, and I think that's exactly what it is. The next thing is what's really fascinating every single year. I'll put these things back on the screen for a second. So in 2022, there seems to be these what I would call like market segmentation. And look, if you're not nerdy on this sort of stuff, I don't know what to do because I'm nerdy. I'm nerding out on this. But you look, it's fascinating that you've got like 90 to 99 was a category, and then sort of 60 to 80. We talked about that before. There seemed to be two groups back in 2022. If you go across, so I just click on here. If I go across to 2023, there doesn't seem to be. It seems to be more of an even spread, like a bell curve, like you would expect. Most people are around the $70 to $80 mark, and it sort of decreases the lower it goes, and it sort of decreases the higher it goes. But 2024, there seems to be these categories. If you can see here on the screen, I'll try and describe it as best as I can. Huge peak of people between 80 and 90. Huge peak of people. And then there's not as many between 90 and 100 as there are 100 and 110. And then there's not as many between 100 and 120, 110 and 120 as there are 120 to 130. And then there's hardly anyone 130 to 140, but there's not heaps, but there is. There's a lot of businesses. I can tell you exactly how many from the survey. There's 39 out of 80. So what's that? 5% of the market. Believe that 1 out of 20 businesses are charging, according to this survey, $140 or more, but only 10 are charging $130 to $140. So it's kind of like, it's a really interesting thing that I think, do you know what I think this is? I think this is people doing their maths and not just following everybody else around them. And I love that, because I think people are going, here's what I need to charge. And I wonder if there's categories of businesses that have similar expenses. So let's say 120 to 129 might be people who have, like, say, a lot of expenses, a lot of ride-on mowers and things like that. And so they go, well, it kind of works out the same. And so you might have a lot of people doing a lot of labor stuff at 100 to 110, but they don't have the same expenses. And then I hope that makes sense. So maybe people are starting to really think it through. And just the maths of owning certain pieces of equipment or running a business a certain way requires you to do it something that way, instead of it just being just a random spread. So that's, anyway, that segmentation is really good. Especially I'll read out some of the notes. Maybe some businesses are positioning themselves as premium services, likely offering additional value through specialized services. So weed spray, fertilization, maybe hedge trim, like high-end hedge trimming, cylinder mowing, things like that. So you got the rising rates every year. Then you got this segmentation that's really weird. You've got competitive landscape in terms of the number of people at the $80 to $90 range. That's huge. And that seems to me, I've always thought the last few years that $80 is the minimum that I think I would charge to be a successful business. And I mean that from terms of as when I cut all my numbers down, just the bare minimum for me to get by, expensive things like that. Obviously, not having a warehouse like we're in here now, and all of crazy expensive things that we've done over the years. But a simple one-man band, if I was restarting, 80 would be my minimum. And I think having that massive spike there kind of shows that too. Now, there is a huge spike around the 70 to 80 range. And maybe a lot of those people as well, they have, for example, maybe they are people who are really young, still living at home. There's a few categories. People just starting out, they don't feel very confident. Could be someone who's ready to retire and they might, they don't have as many expenses, paid off their house, all sort of stuff. They're not, they're not feeding 5 kids. There's different things. So people in those categories could still have a successful business. But I look at the 80 to 90 range and I wonder if what's happened is, again, people have really thought about their numbers and they've gone, well, this is the minimum I need to charge. And that's why there's so many people there, because it just reflects that. The premium services stuff, the 140 category plus is like, it's to be 5% of the market when, if we go back to, I'll look at the data, 2023, it was 1% of the market. And 2024 is 5%. That's just crazy growth. So I think people are getting fed up with the normal services. And it's actually quite interesting because the last thing, so the premium services, which kind of touched on other things, I won't talk on it too much. The last thing I'm really curious behind is consumer response. So what will clients, because I wonder if clients are in a bit of a hostage negotiation right now. I wonder if this is that supply and demand issue. And I wonder if in 2023, people started to wake up to this supply and demand issue, started to make a business they really wanted. And the result of that for, the industry is that people are forced to pay these higher prices because, now I could be wrong with this, so don't go make some business decisions based on my rambling thoughts here. But I wonder if there's a bunch of people who they always had the money, but they always had options. So obviously, like we all would, we're going to pick the cheaper, or I guess a value option. So someone who's not the most expensive, but it's not going to, shaft us or, stuff us around. But maybe those people don't exist anymore. I mean, the data shows that. Data. Should have had that conversation at the start. I think it's data. But you look at that, there's just no one at the bottom end of that 2024 range. There's so few people, like I said, other than 130 to 139, the least popular categories. Well, the least popular category is below 50, but those lowest 3 ranges, hardly anyone is charging that, comparative to 70 to 80 and 80 to 90 and 100 to 110. And so I wonder if people were always looking around that range, but they can't find anyone anymore. And it's kind of like rising tide, all the ships go up. That was a horrible way of all the ships go up. Anyways, moving on. So they're my thoughts, my casual thoughts, but here are my action points that I'm thinking from this. And I don't want this podcast to be too long. Me rambling on a subject, I don't know how long people are really going to listen for. But here are my takeaway points. One is, if you've just started out, I would definitely be charging. If I'm starting out from day one, I'm in the $70 to $90 range from day one. We talked about in the previous it's not previous podcast, in the one I referred to at the beginning, called how much should Australian lawn and garden businesses charge. Go jump on that to properly work out your numbers, because the formulas in that, it's maths. It's almost timeless in a sense. But if you're jumping in blind, you don't have any expenses, you never worked in this industry before, you're like, what should I charge? That $70 to $90 range is where everybody is. And you could start off straight away in that range. And because of what we talked about before, because everyone's getting more expensive, I actually think you would be fairly well sought after if you were honest, reliable, actually did a good job, respected people, had a smile on your face, showed up on time, took some deodorant with you. Underrated tip, deodorant in the car. Another underrated tip, barbecue sauce in the car. You never know when you want a sausage roll and 50 cents on barbecue sauce, or whatever they rip you off these days. Just have it in the car. Anyways, side note. But, you smell nice, you smile, you own up to mistakes if you make them. And, someone like that, $70, $90 an hour these days might actually be really good value for clients. Stand firm. That's what I do. The second thing is that if you've been in business a while and you've been umming and ahhing about raising prices, I think the market's already doing that. So I wonder if there's people who, especially in that 50 to 70 range, who have been umming and ahhing about it. I mean, I just think you could just jump up, especially, unless you're losing clients left, right, and center, because that would indicate that your service isn't up to scratch. You'd have to improve your service first. But if you've been thinking about raising prices, man, it's an interesting philosophy, and I think it's worth having a look into it. What other thoughts? So action points is that I also think that the 140 mark, it's a really interesting thing, because I wonder what we will see next year. I'm always tentative now, even though I'm in that category. Right, we charge, if we don't do this anymore because we don't do packages, but I worked it out when I was doing the survey. For us to make it worthwhile, if I was doing a 1 hour job, I'd want to be at $157, and that's a minimum. That's no product included. Right, that's just labor. So if I'm doing a fertilization application, I want more. If I'm using specialized equipment like vertimills or aerators, definitely more. But that's me, and I've been in business for 10 years. And our employees. But further to the conversation, that market, I think that's where the future of the industry is, because there's huge value in that market. That's why I'm there doing specialized services. But you really have to back yourself, or back up the price with not just a normal mowing service, in my opinion. I think that is a possible thing to aim for, but I think you need to become a specialist in something like high-end lawn care, hedge work, something that takes time and deliberate effort and a really good eye. Things like that, not a normal everyday lawn mowing run, although I do think with really good root efficiency and all that sort of stuff, the sky is the limit, technically, great equipment, things like that. But I think it's a great thing to aim for, and maybe there's some of you who've had like limiting beliefs, and you've thought that wasn't possible or realistic for a lawn mowing business. There's a lot of people doing it way more than I thought. From the previous things, I've always been in that top category, but I definitely wasn't expecting that many people. All right, final thoughts. I didn't even mean to talk about this before, honestly. I mean that. But yes, I have been working on an online course. Like I said at the beginning, I have such a passion for people in this industry, and I want them to succeed. I love the business side of things. I love the lawn care. If you've never been on this podcast before, go back. We've interviewed stadium people, golf course people, some of the best hedge work you've ever seen, veggie garden, all sorts of stuff. I love that side, but I really love the business side too, because that's, like I said, that's, if you have a successful business, the free time and there's things that are so much more valuable. It's not about the money. It's the things that are more valuable than that. And anyways, I'm making a course that is not a course. Most people, when they make a course, it's like, here's all the things that I've done right, and follow me. And this course that I'm making is more like, here's all the things I've done wrong, and don't do that. Trust me, this mistake cost me $27,000. This mistake cost me a hell of a lot more. Hiring this person too early was bad. Doing this was bad. I mean, there's success stories in it as well, because I guess, fixing it and coming to a solution. But I see all these people make the same pitfalls that I made. It's not done yet, but it's a lot of videos and it's a lot of work and it's going to be a lot of money. But I think the value is going to be insane. Like $27,000 was not a number I pulled out of my backside. I once hired somebody. And long story short, in a year and a half, I lost $27,000 off them. And that year, I had been working part-time and trying to swim. I used to swim competitively. And so I was, anyways. And I remember one of my lowest points at that time, and I've had lower points since, which is like somewhat embarrassing. It's not embarrassing. It's just like I remember thinking things could not get worse. They got worse. They got better, and then they got worse, and they got better, and then they got anyways. But I remember being in a Subway one day, and I was ordering a sandwich, and I'd lost money. I wasn't paying tax, and I was behind on super, and I was sitting was standing in line at Subway, and I realized I would have been better off never hiring that guy and getting rid of my business and just working at Subway for a year, because his losses had been just covered by all of my work, and because I was only working part-time, I hardly earned any. I remember that very vividly, and that's what I want to try and help people with. So, look, let me know what you think. If you're someone who's interested, message me. It's probably going to be around $800. I'm also trying to get some brands involved so that there will be, and some of them have said yes. They haven't come back to me. I don't know why I started talking about this. This is not even ready to go, and now here we are. Anyways, some brands are saying yes, and they're working out some deals as we speak, so that people who buy the course get exclusive offers that will hopefully, from the indications I've got, they're going to be pretty damn good deals. Will just outweigh the value of the course anyway. So if you're going to buy some of their stuff, you kind of get the course for free, if you get what I mean. Spend $800 on the course and get $1,000 discount on something else. But that's what we're thinking, and we're working on it. And I'll put something up when it's ready. If you listen to the podcast, you'll find out when it's ready. But my passion there is to help people to make a business that you can be proud of. That something, the work that you do is high quality, and you don't fall for all the stupid mistakes that I fell for over my 10 years. And if anyone's been listening to this, you know that my goal for the podcast is to keep making myself jealous, wishing that I had the podcast when I was starting my business, because I had American stuff and nothing else. And I love the conversations we have with the experts and things like that. And I wish I had those conversations 10 years ago. So keep listening. If you love what we do here, jump on Patreon. It helps out more than you know, honestly. It's so helpful because the thing about Patreon is you get a consistent amount every single month. You sign up for $5 a month or $16.50, I believe it is, a month. And either one of those, whatever you can afford in that category, no judgment. It's just so helpful to have, okay, here's an extra $5 a month. We budget that. I don't take any of that money for myself. Not at this stage. Unless 10,000 of you want to give me $5 a month, I'll take some of that. But we only just make enough money to get by with the cost of this. So jump on there if you love what we're doing. Jump on the Lawn Shed, our sponsor. And if you're buying stuff anyway, I don't know what else. If you're still listening to this, well done, because that was rambling a lot of data. Hopefully it was helpful. And there we go. Another little short episode. I will see you in the next podcast.